Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In this video I would like to talk to you about the concept of second order consequences, especially as it relates to social media. Now we all know that when something happens, usually there is a consequence to that. And there is a thoughtful exercise you can do, particularly about thinking about future issues, which is to think about second order consequences. That means, what are the consequences of the first consequences that happened from an event? And I first started doing this exercise by looking at social media. Now, I may not be the most knowledgeable person about social media, but I remember that there used to be an original promise when social media was coming up in the late 2000s, which was that we would be better connected with each other and there'll be all these positive things that would happen because of that. But of course, in reality, things are never always one-sided. That means they are never always positive. Sometimes there's negative consequences that nobody could have really foreseen, but they happen in the first place. So this is the first video I will do, and it will be the retrospective video, because now we can look back at social media and some of the things that have happened because of it. And in future videos I will try to look more into the future of possible second order consequences of new technology or disruptions that are happening. So beginning with social media, I have made this diagram here where I try to look up both positive and negative aspects of social media. And you can see here that I've highlighted the more important one, which was that original promise, or sin if you want to call it, which is that we would have more and better opportunities for connection. But in fact, there were three main direct consequences of social media. First of all, that was the first one, which is more and better opportunities for connection. Then you also had viral effects in information, and unfortunately we also saw viral effects in misinformation. So let's start with the first one here. Now, when you have more and better opportunities for connection, there are some immediately. First of all, you can have the good part of that, which is great, but also you might have some unintended consequences, like you might see selective sharing for social signaling to a higher hierarchy position. So a lot of people will only share certain things on social media, so they present themselves in a certain way so as to try to achieve a higher hierarchy and get more opportunities in a way. This is a fairly common phenomena that we have seen. But also, an intended consequence might be that connections become less valuable overall because you have much more opportunity to connect in general, so you value each new connection less. That's also a straightforward concept. So when you look at this selective sharing, what could happen because of that? Well, if you're always constantly comparing yourself, then your concept of a tribe or a group that used to be restricted to a more local thing now expands to be global. So if you're always comparing yourself with what you see people around you, but now you see everywhere basically in the world, you see everyone because we're all connected with the social media, then you're always comparing yourself with the absolute best because you'll be exposed to that necessarily. And a consequence of that, of course, will be that you will not feel very happy if you're always comparing yourself to the top 0.01% of people. On the other hand, if connections become less valuable, that means you might see more of disposable friendships. So they are less valuable. That also means they're less strong. That means they might not withstand the pressures and the stress of the events that are happening. As a consequence, you might also see higher divorce and breakup rates. And keep in mind, these are just ideas I'm throwing out there. I don't really have the data to back it up, just anecdotal empirical evidence I may see, which may be biased. But you can easily, I think you can agree that there could be a thread linking these consequences to each other. And as a result of, relationships not being able to withstand the pressure so well, that means people won't be able to stay in the relationship long enough to consider having a baby. That means that the global fertility continues to decline. Also, as a result of this individual happiness, and we always comparing ourselves to others now because we're exposed to so many other people, and also the best people that are always outperforming us. Yeah, you might feel more depressed as a result, and there could be a connection with a rise in suicides. So overall, this whole section that came from more and better opportunities for connection, you might have better connections, but in a sense they might also become more diluted, and that's the point I was trying to make here. Now, if we look at the viral effects in information, I think maybe this could be the most positive aspect of social media. And the immediate side effects that I saw from the viral effects in information were that, first of all, you have this rise of the influencer economy, which has now had many other second consequences because of that. I don't know if you remember also that there was the protests and revolutions known as the Arab Spring that were happening in the early 2010s. They were also a direct response to the viral effects in information that were brought forth, particularly through Twitter and other social media. And also because you have these viral effects in misinformation, you open up the range of possibilities so much that you can have a lot more collaborations, businesses as a result, and also creativity. And an immediate consequence of that is, of course, that you may see an explosion in art and productivity. And that can also result in a rise in alternative business and non-traditional sources of income. For example, a lot of people make their living now through YouTube or through this influencer economy. Might be on Instagram, might be in Snapchat, might be in TikTok. It can be many of these new platforms that have emerged. But you may also see, as a result of all of this new possibility that's possible because of these viral effects of information, you can see that we have new trends, but they're also faster. The trend cycles go faster. So we are running through we are burning through things much faster than we were before, which also means that people have to stay on their toes much more and they have to work a bit more. But one of the immediately negative things that may happen from the viral effects of information is that you will see a lot of agglomeration of power and influence via rent seeking. So here I mean that the platforms that are enabling all of this, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, the Reddits, the Twitters, the Snapchats, the Instagrams, all of that, they have all this information, they have all of this power, and they become what's called a tech giant. That means they start influencing, they have the power, they have enough of power that they can influence the political sphere, and they, more importantly, they can now use that power to draft beneficial legislation to maintain the power. So one of the things that I've noticed is that platforms such as Facebook have an interest in making sure that the legislation, for example, they will say, we need legislation to prevent misinformation, and the only way to do that is if you have certain computers and algorithms that are very expensive. But by making sure that only platforms that can monitor that are legally allowed, all the other ones that cannot afford to do that, they cannot afford the money to put for all these complex algorithms and all this data, they will just not enter. There will be less competition as a result, and therefore that ensures that the monopoly that these tech giants have continues in place. And as a consequence of that, long term, I could see that inequality and total poverty might increase as a result. I didn't also mention that a consequence of the rise of the influencer economy is that traditional media starts to be displaced or even extinct, even more than was already happening just by the spread of the internet. Okay, so now let's go to some of the topics that are more talked about in regards to social media, which is the misinformation. That's a very hot topic nowadays. So when you have viral effects in misinformation, you have, I think, three main things. First of all, there is the obvious political manipulation. This can be used to make geopolitical change of influence, and thus you can have what's called a Cold War or cyber Cold War. So it's a war that's not really a direct war. There's no war that's declared. It's happening behind the scenes, so to speak, and it's cyber in the sense that only happens on the internet, on the web. Then you can also see these new anti-science trends that are coming around, and they start to magnify because of this viral possibility that can happen with information. Information has much less restrictions now to spread. So if someone is able to transmit a meme about that is anti-science, it can magnify that so much more because the barriers to transmit that is so much lower. And as a result of that, particularly with the anti-vax, you might have an increase in eradicated diseases and also an overall dismissal of scientific principles. And both of these will contribute long-term to increased marginal mortality. Lastly, one of the viral effects of misinformation is something that we all have experienced, which is we see that there's a big polarization in discussion of the political realm, and we see also these extreme bias bubbles emerging. So a bias bubble, that would be when people organize into a group and they only find the people in that group really agree with each other, and because of the way the information is moving around and the way that also our brain is working, and we have evolved to have this bias, this viral information just makes it so that these bubbles really become protected from the outside world in a sense, even though the information can go freely. And whenever this reaches a certain breaking point, you will have social unrest inevitably. That's just a consequence of the way things are. So yeah, this was a short video just to show you really that when people were making these platforms, this social media, they had no idea probably that all of this thing could happen as a result, all of this potential side effects or effects of the effects of the effects. So that's something that's really important to think if you are, I don't know, if you are in a business or you're even in a public servant and you have to decide how to legislate things. You have to somehow have these exercises where you think, okay, this might happen and what might happen as a result and what might happen as a result, and continue from that. So you have a plan, so to speak, and you don't really get caught off guard. Now, even if we had done an exercise like this in the late 2000s, it's pretty possible that we couldn't really have prevented all of this. They're just things that are outside of our control, but it's still, I think, important to consider these and to think about these second order consequences, because they're useful. They expand your knowledge of what's possible, and they actually make you consider things that otherwise you would not consider. Okay, so that was it for today. I hope this was somehow, some new information that made you think of things in a different way. And I will be making more of these soon with more towards future technology. So this is more of a looking back, but the next ones will be more about future technology. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.